Don't forget to follow Grit Daily News as well as me, your host, Loralyn Mears, everywhere on social media. And how about throwing 4 or 5 stars our way if you're listening to Apple or Spotify? Subscribe to our show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Grit Files. I am your hostess, Loralyn Mears, and we have someone in the house this week that, well, I think everyone is going to find something to take away from it. Nick Gruel is a serial entrepreneur. He has taken multiple companies from that impetus of an idea where it's nothing more than a little gnat into a $100 million exit to Cisco. He is a serial investor. He's invested in over 40 companies. That allowed him to make a lot of changes and make a lot of founders create impact. He's also had an opportunity, because of that wonderful exit, to buy a few cars. He's a little bit of a collector. And he's returned to his first love, which is all about technology, marrying that with cars, with his new venture called ePropelled, which focuses on an aspect of electronic vehicles that you don't always hear about front and center. So we're going to get into that. Hello, Nick. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Loralyn. Thank you for the invite.
We are excited. As I said, you've done so many things and had such a tremendous impact. So let's dive right into it.
It all started, I was actually racing in Silverstone in UK, and a few of my good friends there said, would you mind taking a look at a car that we're developing, and tell us if this is going to be a car that would have a market in US. So I said, okay, that's great. We'll go out and have a lunch and talk about the stuff. And I saw this car. It was a beautiful, carbon fiber car. And then I asked them, what's the engine in the car? And they said, well, we thought about the American market, so we put a Corvette engine in it. And I was kind of set back a little bit. I said, look, if you're doing this, don't forget, it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago that this happened, And so I said, if you are really serious about putting a car together like this, you may want to consider an electric motor. And then I went and started looking at, purchasing a Tesla. And I looked at the Tesla motor and said, boy, this is somewhat archaic. Back then, it was Model S, and it was an induction motor. And I didn't think that it was a particularly brilliant motor out there, So I said, there's got to be a better way of doing it. So formed ePropelled, called up the lawyers and said, one more company in me, at the tender age of 66. So I'm not a young kid. Okay.
Given the age that you were you thinking, Nick, that you had to start from scratch, or were you looking to, perhaps leverage other technology that was out there to expedite your start?
And then we formed ePropelled, and I started looking at people with patents. And I found this company in UK that actually had some brilliant patents, and I was enamored with it. So I went to see them, and I talked to the CEO, which happened to be our CTO now, Dr. Nabil Shirazi. And Nabil had a couple, 3 guys there, but his patents were brilliant. He had been working on stuff for 15 plus years. And I said, Nabil, I'd like to OEM, or rather, I'd like to license your patents, because I just started ePropelled and stuff like that. So he said, okay. And then I went back and talked to them a number of times. And I said, it will be really great to actually have your company join ePropelled. So that was the start of it. So the first thing we did was, besides actually taking a look at who's doing what and doing some market research and stuff, we actually ended up acquiring a company called Electronica and merged it into ePropelled.
Given that you were trying to set up a highly technical company in the middle of COVID, I would think it actually may have helped you, given greater accessibility to a global talent pool, since everybody was approving remote work. Or what was your situation?
We actually couldn't get enough engineers before COVID. And so we went to India. This is something that I've done in the past. We've had teams of engineers in Israel. We've had teams of engineers in Poland. And this time it was turn of India. And we actually went and started looking at electromagnetics engineers, which we couldn't find anywhere else, and found some really smart guys there, and then realized that there's a huge market for two-wheelers and three-wheelers. So we got some marketing guys and sales guys and started doing some research and said, this is really a great market. We should be here. And that office started to sort of develop. But, March of 2020, COVID hit. So we couldn't go anywhere. But nonetheless, during the last 2 years, we've been actually building the company. And we went from few guys, I can't remember, 8 or 10 guys, in 2019 to something like 70 people now. And we're in 3 continents.
I've got another question for you, Nick. When you're talking about the electronic vehicles and creating motors, are there other applications?
We also got into doing motors that are sustainable motors for pool pumps and stuff. We got in there, so we got two-wheelers, three-wheelers market, and now we actually have stuff for the sustainability market, where we got very efficient motors or propulsion systems that can actually pump water at 90+% efficiency, which is very rare out there. So that's how it started, and that's our journey for the last 36 months or so plus. That's ePropelled, basically trying to build propulsion systems, and that involves magnetics engineering, mechanical engineering. It also involves power electronics, software, embedded software, as well as generic, electronics. And then future, I think we will be doing a lot of software kind of development. My take on it is that we are building a platform for literally all kinds of different vehicles, and eventually we will be a software company. Quite honestly, that's our future.
Nick, that's fantastic. And everybody seems to get focused around electronic vehicles, talking about batteries and sustainability. But you are focused on, I think, a side that people don't really understand. Talk to us a little bit more about the potential of electronic motors and how they can be used in everything from industrial to military to commercial applications.
Okay, Loralyn, very good question. I think the key part here is that about 20 years ago, the motor technology really took a turn. It went from induction motors, which are over 120 years ago, to permanent magnet motors. Now, permanent magnet motors they can be really very efficient. And the other part of it is that they don't have to operate at the mains voltage and also cycles. So in Europe, you have 50 hertz. In US, you have 60 hertz. And if you look at induction motors, they have a multiples of that. And that's where, it determines what the design of the motor is, and also what the speed of the motor is going to be. So sustainable motors operate in Europe, it's 2,900 something, and here it's 3,460 something. But with permanent magnet motors and electronic drives, that goes out of the window. So right now, we've been busy trying to do replacement motors that are permanent magnet motors. By the way, the world is actually also worried about permanent magnet motors having rare earth metals. And I have and people say, boy, this is rare earth. And why is it that, why would you use that? Because it's a very, very fine commodity. The fact of the matter is, rare earth is not that rare. It's everywhere. It's actually in, obviously it's in China, it's in Australia, it's in US. In fact, 15% of rare earth magnet material comes from Nevada, and it gets shipped to China for processing. So just because it's processed over there, and same with Europe, actually, there's a lot of rare earth, including in Cornwall. There's rare earth right there. It's in Africa, it's in South America. And quite honestly, also, once you actually mined it and cleaned it up, it can be used again and again and again. And I think this is a really important step. I think this is the key here. But I think the shortage in the world truly is of electrons, because electrons is electricity. And to get electricity, we use very dirty methods. We use coal, we use gas, and we use nuclear power. There is solar and wind, of course. Those are cleaner technologies. So electrons themselves can be very dirty. And using electrons in the most efficient way is really important. And most people to date have concentrated on making the batteries efficient, but they have not, concentrating so far of how they're using those electrons in any vehicle, or any motor. I think this is the key part that the world in future will realize, that this is a commodity that's really very important.
So thank you for clearing up a few myths, like rare earth is not that rare. Number two,
Yeah.
No wonder why Area 51 is in Nevada, if that's the greatest concentration of rare earth metals in the world. And number three, that there is a reusability and a sustainability component that people are overlooking. The other thing that you've addressed, Nick, which I think is really important for our audience, is that age doesn't matter. You've had a lot of experience. You've done different things. You've figured out a way to accelerate the development of these electronic motors by working with existing patents and companies, that there's always a way. You don't have to do everything yourself. So talk to our audience about the experiences you've had and give us the ugliest, grittiest story of when you were hanging on by your fingernails and you had to find a way to move forward. Give us that story.
Actually, again, you're really hitting the points here. Okay. I always think that as entrepreneurs, we cannot allow our success to be in other people's hands. I think this is a key. A lot of people actually come down and say, or they think about, well, it's easy. All I got to do is just go to this company and they'll do this for me, or this institution, they'll do this for me, or the venture guys, they'll, fix my money problems, But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, I think you got to be able to actually say what's really important to you, what factors are going to make your success really important. And you got to make sure that you actually handle that. And, when you're actually looking for resources outside, and you have to know who you are, quite honestly. Okay. You actually got to be able to actually say, this really matters, and I don't want to allow a single point failure. So, this process really matters, or this, this stuff really matters. This marketing really matters. This manufacturing really matters. And quite honestly, what we are at ePropelled, we are a technology company, and we have to know that. That means we have to build technology ourselves. We have to get patents. We got to make sure that our technology is protected. So, in the last 36 months, we actually filed 35 patents. And before the end of the year, we're probably going to have, over 40 patents, quite honestly. So I think that number is going to be, it's something that we do really seriously. But we're not a manufacturing company. So, we don't want to use bricks and mortar. This is something that we don't do. Me being from not the automobile industry, me being from the computer industry, the networking industry, we actually always played with CMs, contract manufacturing shops, and there are thousands of them around the world. You just have to find the right one. You got to have people that can actually articulate what you need, and you got to have inside the company people that can actually determine whether a CM is good or not. And if you're not going to manufacture anything, and our customers want to manufacture something, then we allow them to do it. They want to manufacture a motor, go ahead, be our guest. If you want us to manufacture it, we would be happy to find a CM and we'll deliver you the product, but we don't have to do it ourselves. I think this is the key. And if you're doing sales, again, I think there are a lot of sales forces out there. Our customers have the biggest sales forces. We may have 4 people, but our customers have 4,000 sales guys. So why wouldn't we use their sales guys? We don't have to use our sales guys. These are really important things, because if we use our sales guys only and say, oh, we got to be the one who are selling this product, then guess what? Our growth rate is going to be limited. Whereas using other people's feet in the street or other people's hand to manufacture, it's really a key thing. But you really got to know, first of all, who you are and what are you supposed to be good at.
And what about those times where you have failed because you have succeeded enough, clearly, and you have so many companies and investments, but it can't all have a 100% perfect track record. Nobody does.
That's right.
Talk to us about that moment where you were failing and you had to dig in emotionally, financially, whatever you had to do to pull yourself out of that. How did you find the strength, or what did you do, Nick? What's your advice and counsel to other entrepreneurs who are struggling right now?
Okay. I think, I have to tell you that every company on the planet has problems. Doesn't matter who they are, whether they make $1 billion a week or they make $10 a week, they all have problems. I realized that when I went into Cisco. I hate to say this, I thought we had problems, but when I got into Cisco, who looked like, city on the hill. I mean, this was 25 years ago. You couldn't do anything wrong in Cisco. It looked like they were the best out there until we got inside Cisco and then realized, oh boy, there are so many problems here, it's not funny. So every company has problems, including ePropelled. ePropelled has problems. But, we got to be able to articulate those problems, and we got to be able to make the mistakes. Every company has to make mistakes. And the key thing that I say to all my guys is make mistakes, please. If you're not making mistakes, you're in a big company like GE or IBM. Because there, if you didn't make a mistake, you automatically get promoted. But if you made a mistake, then you don't get promotion. But we encourage here in company like ours to make the mistakes, but learn from it quickly and don't do it twice. I think that is the key here. And quite honestly, I've made many mistakes. The other thing that I want to tell you is that when I was a kid, I used to be a chess player. I played chess for the school team. And every time I won, I said, I'm the greatest. Nobody can beat me. But when I actually lost the game, I couldn't go to sleep that night as a teenager. I played the game in my head again and again. If I had done this move, then it would have been this, then it would have been that. So what I learned from that as a kid was, you actually learn a lot more by losing than by winning. And it's very important to actually be able to do that. But I think to actually make a mistake and actually dwell on it and say, boy, we should never have done that. That is a big mistake.
So how does a small company, as a startup, enter a global stage and actually find a way to be competitive?
Okay, momentum, my friend back from England, Isaac, he told me that momentum is mass times velocity. Guess what? Companies like us don't have mass. So guess what? We have to have velocity. We have to have speed in order for us to have momentum. Every company on the planet has to have momentum. So even the large companies have to have momentum. Look at Ford. My friend Jim, he's got momentum, but he's got a big ship, and we got a little tiny, rowboat. But nonetheless, if he doesn't have momentum, he will be stuck. So, Jim Farley is a great guy. I raced with him, and I think he's doing a great job turning Ford around. And he's actually on a tanker where I'm on a tiny rowboat.
I love that message for our audience about momentum, that you can achieve it at any size. Which you lack in size, like you said, in weight and in mass, you can counter with speed. I think
That-
that's phenomenal. But also on the topic of momentum, in your press release, working with an Israeli company creating a quad engine, something along the lines of drone to enable the future of baby home delivery. Talk to us a little bit about that, whatever you can share.
Okay. Air Rotor was the company that we actually did that press announcement with. They're a small company like us, and they're moving fast as well. We're actually working with some very large companies as well throughout the world. We have customers in Australia, in Japan, in India, and also in Israel, obviously, in UK, in Europe, and here in North America. But I think the key part of working with a company like that is, we're both doing very innovative work, and I think some of the things that we're doing, I'm not sure anybody else on the planet is doing, where you're actually turning a motor into a generator and that generator into a motor on the fly. So, we do two things on a drone. We actually do propulsion, so we have propulsion motors and we have motor controllers. We also do power on the drone. So why do you need power on the drone? You have two ways of getting power on the drone to actually drive the motors and drive everything else. So one way of doing it is you can have batteries. Batteries can be heavy, and a typical drone would go max of about 40 minutes. So in order for the drone to go beyond 40 minutes, you have to have a very small gas engine. So in some instances, we call them hybrid applications. They actually have a gas engine that drives the propeller. But nonetheless, between the gas engine and the propeller, they actually put our motor. Our motor can start the gas engine. So it's a starter generator. Okay, and then it turns into a generator. But also, when you're actually taking off and you need maximum thrust and maximum power to take off and climb. Climb always needs, I've been a pilot for 30 years. The most important part of, getting a plane up is actually during the climb. So in that space, we can actually help the gas engine by having a motor that's assisting the gas engine. So they don't need as big a gas engine as they normally would. So this is a very innovative thing that we've done with a number of our customers, and also we do that we have done that with Air Rotor. So I think it enables a drone to actually become optimum, from use of energy point of view, and be able to sustain itself beyond 40 minutes to anything up to 8 hours. Thank you for asking that question.
Excellent. Just reducing the impact on so many levels, the size of the engine, the amount of gas consumed,
That's
the
right.
ability to, to accelerate and to burn all that energy up front so that it has a much greater lifespan with respect to the use like per trip. That's really interesting. Now, let's turn away from some of the professional and corporate aspects of ePropelled and talk a little bit more about you, Nick. So if I gave you an undo button and you get to hit it once, what would you change?
Oh boy. There are always so many things, especially in personal life. You can actually say, boy, I wish I had done the undo button. One thing that I haven't been able to do really well is in my personal life is actually having a partner that I can be with. So this is one of the undo buttons. If I go back to being a kid at college, and once again dating, I probably would have been a lot smarter than I was. So
well, you're too busy building companies, right?
Oh, actually, I've
new technologies. It's you can't have it all. And in some ways, our audience, I'm sure, is going to be glad to hear that, because everybody's got something, right, that we're all grappling with. So
very personal thing. But
yeah.
I've been, I've had two. I have two ex-wives, and now I kind of decided I'm really not very good at this.
Well,
I-
sometimes you're going to try it out a few times to get to that realization, right?
yeah.
And one thing I'm curious about, and I know our audience loves this question, and I'm very excited to ask it of you because you've done so much. You've had massive success, like on a huge level, not only from the size of your exit into Cisco, but the number of companies you've invested in, the number of companies you've started, the impact that you've had. What scares you? What's your kryptonite? Do you have no fear, or is there always something that's there, even with all that success?
No, actually, there were a couple of friends that I knew. One was when I sold the company to Cisco. John Chambers was, kind of a friend. I remember him walking down the corridor and saying, "Nick, can you lend me some money?" But I think John got this concept from Andy Grove at Intel. Okay. Because I think Andy Grove was the first guy to come up with it. No matter what company you have to be a little paranoid. You have to be it's the success of your company is not always dependent on what you do inside, but it's dependent on what the rest of the world does outside the company. So in a way, you actually have to, paranoid may be a wrong word that Andy used, but you have to be aware. You have to be aware of your environment, the world that we live in. And quite honestly, now, now that COVID is over, I'm starting travels again. I've been to UK a couple, 3 times. I've been to India once. So, managed to actually see the team, people that I never saw before, and they were part of our team. The way we saw them was through, conference calls and stuff. But now I've been able to go there and shake hands. And the same is true of customers. I love going to see customers and really learning about what their problems are. How can we resolve these problems? And also learning about our competitors. We have to be able to respect our competitors because they may actually come up with things that we haven't even thought about. Andy Grove actually came up with that, that you really have to be aware of what's going on. What are the governments thinking? What's going on? Who would have predicted, COVID? Actually, one of the books that I really like is a book called The Black Swan. I don't know whether you read it or not. It was written by a professor in New York at NYU, actually. And he actually claims in the book that, in 1700s in Europe, there were no black swans. So people didn't think that there were black swans. And then Captain Cook went to Australia and New Zealand and found black swans for the first time. So black swans are events that you don't actually anticipate at all. 9/11 was a black swan event. They used to happen every 100 years or every 200 years, but now they're happening every 20 years. But we all have to be aware of it because a black swan event can actually wipe us off the map, no matter what size the company. Big companies have disappeared. You wouldn't have thought so. Dr. Wang, had a company here in Lowell, same town that we're in, and he had the most number of patents in the world. In fact, his patents actually undid the company. Once he was gone, there was no flame. So you really got to be able to actually build the company in such a way that you're not key to it. We don't have to worry about that right now. And I think most of the young companies out there don't have to worry about it. You got to get it to a point, but then you have to obsolete yourself. And I totally understand that.
That is such great advice. And in the context of all of that, don't laugh, but we're going to close with a silly little fluffy question, but it is our signature question on the Grit Files. So, Nick, if we got the opportunity to look into your closet and there was a pair of footwear there that personified who you are, your personality, what you stand for, what you believe in, describe that pair of shoes or boots or whatever it is to us and why it represents Nick Gruel.
Okay. So, first of all, my parents were from Northern India. They immigrated to UK. And I immigrated from UK to the US. That was 40 years ago, actually. And what I've learned is to be nimble, not to be attached to anything, but really run fast. Okay. So speed really matters. So I love, fast boats, I love fast sailboats. I love fast planes. I've had biplanes that you can go and do loops and, stuff. And I love fast racing, so speed always matters. So if I have to pick something, it will be the sneakers.
Excellent. I figured that's where you were going with it when you talked about velocity and everything else. So
That's
with
right.
that, Nick Gruel, founder of ePropelled, serial entrepreneur, serial investor, we are so excited that you were on our show today and teaching us a little bit about the other aspects behind electronic vehicles, the power of the motor, and making more sustainable and longer lasting choices. So thank you so much for being on our show, Nick.
Loralyn, you're very kind. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you for letting me speak with you, and hopefully we'll do this again.
I'd love to have a follow-up in here. Maybe you've gone beyond quad. Maybe it's octo. Maybe it's all kinds of things, right? Other applications. Maybe we'll be seeing three-wheelers and that delivering in India with the ePropelled logo on the side with the motors powered by. We'll be watching for it. Thank you, Nick.
Great. Thank you so much, Loralyn. All the best.
And how about that fantastic intro by Touch Circle?